My dear child, don't scroll away just yet. The person you love has two close friends with very different opinions about you. One believes you could bring peace into their life, while the other sees things through a completely different lens. Today, not everything you hear will be easy, but if you stay until the end, you'll understand why these voices matter, and what wisdom you should carry forward. There are moments in life when the truth does not arrive through loud announcements. It reveals itself quietly, through conversations you never heard, through thoughts never spoken aloud, and through the impressions people form while simply watching from a distance. Imagine, for a moment, standing outside a room where your name has just been mentioned. You cannot hear every word, yet you can sense that your presence has changed the atmosphere. One voice becomes warm with hope. Another grows cautious with concern. Neither voice tells the whole story. But together, they reveal something important. The people closest to the one you love do not see you through the same window. Each carries different experiences, different fears, and different expectations. What they notice says as much about them as it does about you. One friend has quietly observed the kindness you show, even when no one applauds it. They have noticed your patience during difficult moments, your willingness to remain when others would have walked away. To them, you represent calm in a world that often feels uncertain. But another friend has been looking through a different lens. Not because they hate you. Not because they wish you harm. But because they have witnessed struggles that taught them to question every new possibility before trusting it. Sometimes people build walls after surviving storms. They mistake caution for wisdom, and distance for protection. That is why two honest people can look at the very same person and arrive at completely different conclusions. Here is the question few ever stop to ask. Whose opinion should truly shape your future? The answer is more surprising than you might expect. If your heart immediately wants to prove someone wrong, pause for a moment. A heart driven only by the need for approval rarely finds peace. Lasting peace begins when your character speaks louder than your defense. There is quiet strength in allowing time to reveal who you really are. Not every misunderstanding deserves an argument. Not every doubt deserves your energy. Some truths become undeniable only after they have been lived. And while these two friends continue forming their opinions, something else is happening beneath the surface, something the person you love has not fully spoken about yet. They are listening. Listening more carefully than anyone realizes. Every conversation, every observation, every moment of silence is shaping a decision that has not yet reached the light. What they choose next will depend on something far deeper than popularity or persuasion. It will depend on what consistently proves itself to be true. And the next piece of this story reveals why one unexpected moment changes everything. There is something remarkable about quiet moments. They often carry more weight than the loudest conversations. While everyone assumes opinions are formed through dramatic events, hearts are usually changed by the smallest details, the moments no one thinks anyone else is noticing. The person you love has been watching those moments. Perhaps they have seen how you respond when plans fall apart, how you speak about people who are absent, how you carry yourself when there is nothing to gain. These ordinary moments have become extraordinary evidence. Yet the two voices around them continue to pull in opposite directions. One friend says, "Give this connection room to breathe. There is something genuine here. Not everything valuable arrives wrapped in certainty." The other quietly replies, "Be careful. Sometimes what seems promising at first becomes complicated later." Neither voice is completely without reason. One speaks from hope. The other speaks from experience. And somewhere between those two perspectives stands the person you love, trying to separate fear from wisdom. This is where many people make a costly mistake. They spend so much energy trying to change someone else's opinion that they forget the only testimony that truly lasts is a life lived with integrity. Character has a quiet confidence. It does not chase every rumor. It does not panic every time someone misunderstands it. It simply continues becoming what it was always meant to be. Think about a tree. It never argues that it is healthy. It simply keeps growing, until the fruit becomes impossible to ignore. In the same way, the most convincing answer is often consistency. That is why this season is asking something unusual of you. Not louder words. Not dramatic gestures. But steady faithfulness to the values you want your life to reflect. And while this unfolds, something unexpected begins happening inside the heart of the person you love. Questions that once seemed settled are returning. Assumptions are being challenged. Old fears are losing some of their influence. It is subtle. Almost invisible. Yet it is real. Sometimes clarity arrives one quiet realization at a time rather than through a single life-changing moment. The interesting part is this. The friend who has been the most skeptical is beginning to notice something they did not expect. Not because anyone convinced them with perfect arguments, but because reality has a way of speaking for itself. There is one specific moment approaching, a simple conversation, perhaps even an ordinary interaction, that will leave a deeper impression than anyone anticipates. No grand announcement. No dramatic confrontation. Just one honest moment that quietly shifts the direction of every opinion in the room. But before that moment arrives, one final question remains unanswered. Will the person you love have the courage to trust what they have seen with their own eyes, or will they continue allowing other voices to decide what their heart should believe? The answer is closer than it has ever been, and the next chapter reveals why that choice becomes impossible to ignore. Sometimes the greatest turning points arrive without anyone realizing they have begun. No music announces them. No crowd gathers to witness them. Life simply places two people in an ordinary moment, and suddenly, everything that once seemed uncertain begins to make a different kind of sense. The person you love is approaching one of those moments. Until now, they have carried the weight of many voices. Advice has come from every direction. Some words have encouraged them to move forward. Others have urged them to slow down. Each opinion has left its mark, making it difficult to know which path deserves their trust. Yet there comes a point when borrowed opinions are no longer enough. Every heart must eventually decide for itself. That moment is drawing near. One friend still believes that your presence brings something rare. They have noticed that whenever your name comes up, there is a quiet change in the atmosphere. The conversations become less about appearances, and more about the kind of person you are becoming. They admire qualities that cannot be purchased. Patience. Grace. A willingness to grow. These are treasures that time reveals, not impressions that can be created overnight. But the other friend has remained hesitant. Not because they refuse to see good, but because they have learned that trust should never be given carelessly. Even so, something unexpected has begun to soften their certainty. A single observation. A brief interaction. A small act of honesty that seemed almost insignificant. Sometimes the smallest moments carry the greatest truth. People often expect life-changing answers to arrive in dramatic ways, yet wisdom has a habit of whispering before it ever speaks loudly. This is why you must never underestimate the quiet choices you make each day. They become your reputation long before they become your recognition. And while all of this unfolds, the person you love finds themselves thinking about you in moments that surprise even them. Not because someone told them to, but because certain memories refuse to disappear. A conversation they replay. A smile they didn't expect to remember. A kindness that keeps returning to their thoughts. These memories are asking a question that cannot be ignored forever. Was there more value here than I first understood? Questions like this are powerful. They invite reflection instead of reaction. They create space for truth to breathe. And that is exactly where meaningful decisions are born. So if your heart has been restless, do not let uncertainty convince you that nothing is happening. Some of life's most important work takes place beneath the surface, where no applause can reach and no audience can interrupt. Roots grow long before branches are admired. Character is strengthened long before it is recognized. And relationships often deepen long before they are defined. Soon, the person you love will find themselves standing at a crossroads where they can no longer depend on the opinions of others. They will have to ask one simple question. What has this person's actions consistently shown me? That answer, more than any outside voice, will shape what comes next. But there is still one hidden piece of this story waiting to be uncovered. Because someone is about to say something completely unexpected. And those few words will cause everyone involved to see this connection from an entirely different perspective. There comes a moment when silence can no longer carry the weight of unanswered questions. What has been quietly building beneath the surface begins to rise, not with chaos, but with clarity. The person you love is nearing that moment. For a long time, they allowed the opinions around them to echo in their mind. Every encouraging word gave them hope. Every cautious warning invited another layer of hesitation. It felt as though they were trying to solve a puzzle with pieces that never seemed to fit together. But something has changed. Not in a dramatic flash. Not through a single conversation. But through a series of small moments that have quietly formed a bigger picture. Then, one day, an unexpected conversation begins. No one plans for it. No one realizes how important it will become. Your name comes up once again. This time, however, the room feels different. The friend who once spoke with confidence about your potential chooses to listen instead of persuade. They know that truth no longer needs defending when it has been consistently demonstrated. Then the other friend speaks. There is a pause. Longer than anyone expected. Finally, they admit something they never thought they would say. Maybe I judged too quickly. Those words do not erase every question. They do not suddenly answer everything. But they open a door that had remained closed for far too long. Sometimes the strongest opinion is not the one that never changes. It is the one humble enough to grow when new understanding appears. That realization catches the person you love by surprise. For the first time, they stop asking, "What does everyone else think?" Instead, a different question begins to take shape. What have I seen with my own heart? That question changes everything. Because deep down, they remember moments that cannot be explained away. They remember how you remained respectful when life became complicated. How you chose patience over pressure. How your actions stayed steady even when circumstances were uncertain. Those memories begin connecting like stars across a night sky. One by one. Until a picture emerges that was impossible to see before. This is an important reminder for anyone listening. You cannot control every opinion. You cannot rewrite every misunderstanding. And you cannot force someone else to see what they are unwilling to notice. But you can choose the kind of person you become every single day. In time, consistency has a quiet way of answering questions that arguments never could. The person you love is beginning to understand that. Not because someone demanded it. But because the evidence has been unfolding in front of them all along. Yet just as clarity starts to settle into their heart, another unexpected detail comes to light. It is not a secret meant to create fear. It is a realization that brings perspective. A piece of the story that explains why those two friends viewed you so differently from the very beginning. Once that truth is revealed, everything that once seemed confusing will finally begin to make sense. And that revelation is closer than anyone realizes. It is easy to believe that every opinion is formed by the person standing in front of us. But often, opinions are shaped long before two lives ever cross paths. This is the part of the story that few people ever consider. The two friends were never truly looking through the same window. One had learned to recognize hope, even after disappointment. They understood that every new chapter deserves the chance to be written without being judged by the pages that came before. The other had walked through seasons that left deep questions behind. They had seen promises broken. They had watched trust fade. So when they looked at someone new, they instinctively searched for reasons to be careful rather than reasons to believe. Neither perspective was completely right. Neither was completely wrong. They were simply carrying different histories. And history has a quiet way of coloring the way people see the present. The person you love is beginning to understand this. They are realizing that the different opinions surrounding you were never just about you. They were reflections of two very different life experiences. That realization brings something unexpected. Compassion. Instead of asking, who was right? They begin asking, what has each person been through that led them to see things this way? Questions like these do not create division. They create wisdom. Because wisdom does not rush to choose sides. It patiently searches for understanding. As this new perspective settles into their heart, something else begins to happen. The conversations become quieter. More thoughtful. Less about assumptions and more about reality. The person you love no longer feels the need to collect everyone's approval before listening to their own heart. They begin paying attention to what has remained consistent from the very beginning. The respect. The honesty. The willingness to grow. These are not qualities that appear overnight. They are revealed over time, often without anyone realizing it. Think about the sunrise. It does not arrive all at once. The darkness slowly gives way to light until, almost without noticing, the entire landscape looks different. That is how clarity often enters a person's life. Not in one dramatic moment, but through many small moments that finally connect. And now, the person you love stands on the edge of a decision that feels more personal than ever before. They understand that every voice around them has offered something valuable. Hope reminded them not to give up too quickly. Caution reminded them to choose with care. But neither voice can make the final decision for them. That choice belongs to their own heart. And as they prepare to take that step, they notice something that has been present all along. Not perfection, but authenticity. Not flawless moments, but consistent character. Sometimes, that is the greatest reassurance anyone can offer. Yet before this journey reaches its conclusion, one final lesson remains. It is the lesson that explains why the strongest relationships are not built on perfect first impressions. They are built on truth that continues to reveal itself, one faithful step at a time. And when that final lesson is understood, everything that once felt uncertain begins to find its proper place. There is one final distance that must be crossed before everything becomes clear. It is not the distance between two people. It is the distance between uncertainty and understanding. The person you love has arrived at a quiet crossroads. For so long, they believed they needed one opinion to be completely right and the other completely wrong. But life rarely unfolds in such simple ways. Instead, they are beginning to see that every conversation, every question, and every moment of reflection has been leading them toward a deeper kind of wisdom. The friend who believed in you from the beginning smiles, not because they won an argument, but because patience has allowed truth to reveal itself naturally. The friend who once hesitated is also changing. Not overnight. Not all at once. But enough to recognize something important. They realized they were trying to protect someone they cared about, yet in doing so, they may have overlooked the possibility that genuine people sometimes arrive in unexpected ways. That realization carries humility. And humility has the power to transform even the strongest opinions. The person you love watches this change unfold quietly. They notice that the conversations are no longer filled with assumptions. Instead, they are filled with thoughtful questions. What kind of future could this become? What truly matters in the long run? What have we consistently seen, rather than simply imagined? Those questions begin replacing old doubts. Then something unexpected happens. The person you love stops looking outward for one final answer. Instead, they look inward. They remember the peace they felt during your best conversations. They remember the respect you showed when no one was keeping score. They remember that even in uncertain moments, your actions remained steady. And suddenly, they understand something that had been hidden in plain sight all along. Trust is not created in one extraordinary moment. It is built through countless ordinary moments that quietly prove themselves over time. That is why this journey was never really about convincing anyone. It was about becoming someone whose life speaks louder than fear, louder than assumptions, and louder than passing opinions. As this realization settles into their heart, a quiet confidence begins to replace hesitation. Not because every question has been answered, but because they now know which questions truly matter. And just when it seems the story has reached its destination, one final insight begins to unfold. It is the lesson that ties every conversation, every opinion, and every moment together. A lesson that reveals why this entire journey may have been preparing both of you for something greater than either of you first imagined. And that final lesson is waiting in the next chapter. Every meaningful journey eventually arrives at a moment where the questions become quieter. Not because every mystery has been solved, but because the heart has learned where to place its trust. This is that moment. The person you love is no longer standing between two competing opinions. They are standing before their own understanding. The voices that once seemed so powerful have become part of the journey, but they are no longer directing it. Something deeper has taken their place. Clarity. It did not arrive with dramatic words. It arrived through consistency. Through patience. Through the quiet evidence of character revealed one day at a time. Now the person you love can look back and see the path more clearly. The encouraging friend offered hope when doubt was strongest. The cautious friend offered reminders not to rush important decisions. Neither voice was meant to become the final destination. Both were stepping stones leading toward wisdom. That is often how life works. Even different opinions can serve a meaningful purpose when they lead us to think more carefully and love more wisely. Perhaps that is the lesson your own heart needed to hear today. Do not fear every disagreement. Not every difference is meant to divide. Sometimes it exists to deepen understanding. The person you love now realizes that what impressed them most was never a perfect image. It was your willingness to remain genuine even when you did not know who was watching. That kind of authenticity cannot be imitated for long. It quietly reveals itself through everyday choices. And those choices have spoken more loudly than you may ever know. As they reflect on everything that has unfolded, a gentle peace begins to replace uncertainty. The need for constant reassurance fades. The pressure to satisfy every opinion disappears. What remains is something far more valuable. Respect. Trust. And the quiet confidence that comes from seeing someone's true character over time. If there is one truth to carry forward, let it be this. Never measure your worth by the changing opinions of others. People see only moments. Character is revealed across seasons. Continue becoming the person you are called to be. Continue choosing kindness over resentment. Patience over impulse. Integrity over appearance. The right people will recognize those qualities in time. As this chapter comes to a close, remember that every conversation, every challenge, and every differing opinion became part of a greater story. Not a story about winning approval, but a story about discovering what truly lasts. And perhaps, that has been the greatest gift of this entire journey. Because when the noise finally fades, it is not the loudest voice that remains in the heart. It is the quiet truth that proved itself again and again. Carry that truth with you. Let it shape your steps. And trust that what is built on sincerity, wisdom, and steady character has a way of enduring long after passing opinions have disappeared. Thank you for staying until the end of this journey. May you move forward with hope, walk in wisdom, and never forget that the strongest foundations are built one faithful step at a time.